Well, I mean, I would start with the village wines, like the village level wines. Furth, Grüner Veltliner, Furth Riesling, and so on. Furth, that's the name of the village where we are located, and it's like an appellation in a village category to our appellation system. So you have the regional wines, where the grapes are coming from the whole region Kremstal. Second level would be the village wines, where grapes are coming from different vineyards, but all within the same village. In our case, it's Furth, so that's the name of the village where we are located, and that's actually the village appellation where we are setting. And then at the highest, but at the third level, like the level of the closest origin, that's the single vineyard. Now we are starting with Furth. We don't have actually regional wines because it's all estate fruit, and all the vineyards are here within the village Furth, except two single vineyards in Pfaffenberg and Kögel, but those are single vineyards anyhow. And we are starting with Furth Grüner Veltliner. So Furth, again, the name of the village, and the Grüner Veltliner, most typical grape variety at the area, in the area. More than 50%, so more than half of all vineyards planted within Kremstal is Grüner Veltliner, so it's quite dominant. Here on the Furth wines, I always like to have a clear profile of the grape variety. So you should actually easily could figure out that this wine is from a Grüner Veltliner grape variety, which is kind of nice in balance. It's juicy, it has some herbal notes, some peppery notes, but also some lemon and apple aromas coming through. It's a wine which I always say you can drink all day long. You can start drinking it with breakfast in the morning, going over to lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, your little midnight of anything with Grüner Veltliner. It's fine. So it's a wine which fits to a lot of different dishes, a lot of different people. It's easygoing, easy drinking, and it's like most typical Austrian. Another Furth wine, so here it's the Furth Riesling. Similar to Grüner Veltliner, here it's about the grape variety Riesling, which is second dominant in the area, also second dominant in our winery. And again, an easy drinking Riesling with a good, precise acidity, which juicy characteristic with a good structure, but not too complicated, a good fruitiness. You feel some stone fruit characteristics, you feel some apricots, some peaches. For all our wines, as I mentioned before, we only use estate fruit, so I don't buy any other grapes. And here within the winery, the goal or the aim is not to interfere and not to change the characteristic coming from the vineyard. So I believe that good quality is created in the vineyard, not in the winery. So I really put the focus to keep it as simple and as natural as possible here in the winery, which means I don't use any cultivated yeast. Everything is fermented spontaneous. That of course implies that I only can process very healthy and clean fruit. So I have a zero botrytis tolerance. If there is botrytis, then we pick out the berries. If there is a lot of botrytis, we take these berries and make sweet wine. Otherwise, we don't use it at all. And so all the wines should be very clean and very focused, very precise, always very pure and elegant and rich in finesse, but they are never opulent, never fat. So it's just my style of wine that I always want to have, like a more feminine, pure and elegant style. The cool thing is that we have a lot of different type of soils. So that allows us first to grow both Grüner Veltliner and Riesling. And when you think about that, those grape varieties are dominant in the area, but actually those grape varieties are complementary varieties, which means what the one likes, the other does not. And how is it possible that you at the same time can plant those grape varieties in the same area, in the same region? And the answer is because we have different soil types. There are soil compositions made of like alluvial soil or like very fertile sandy loamy soil, which can handle water supply much better, which actually can store the water quite well, which is very important for Grüner Veltliner. Grüner Veltliner is a grape variety needing a lot of but much more water and much more nutrients than Riesling does. So we have those soils for Grüner Veltliner. On the other hand, there are these rocky type soils, like this kind of calcareous schist or granite soils, which are much drier and more dense, and that's perfect for Riesling. So the reason is that we have those soil types to have the ability to grow both Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, and as well as some other grape varieties, which brings me to another wine, which is called Am Zaum. So that's already a single vineyard. Am Zaum Pinot Blanc. So I've just been talking about Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, and in addition to those two grape varieties, we always have had a focus to Burgundy varieties in our estate, meaning we are planting Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, also a little bit of Pinot Gris, because there is even an more additional soil type, which you find very close to the River Danube. You know, the River Danube is running through our area, and we are located here in our village Furth, not very far from the Danube. And in ancient times, when the river was not regulated, you actually had some floodlands, some flood areas, some wetlands at our place, where anytime there was a lot of rain, the river could go over the border and escape and spread out. Now the riverbed is regulated, and those areas where the river used to expand and go over the border is now actually available for planting vineyards. And that's where we plant the Burgundy varieties, because you have a lot of gravel there, and the gravel shows a very high content of chalk. It's very calcareous, which the Burgundy varieties like a lot in order to enhance their minerality. So Pinot Blanc Am Zaum, the single vineyard Am Zaum, is one of those sites where you have this calcareous gravel, and it's a great wine because it's a very versatile wine. It fits to all different type of people, all different type of food. It's not too intense of fruit, it's not too intense of acidity. Everything is nice in place and very balanced. So you know, if you don't know what wine opening for a specific dish or with a specific group of people, you take the Am Zaum Pinot Blanc and you never can go wrong. In terms of altitude, we are located here about 200 meters above sea level. That's the altitude of the village Furth, also the city of Kremstal. And like the vineyards are going up to a maximum of 450, 480 meters above sea level when you go up the hills on the specific single vineyards. Am Zaum, actually it's a vineyard coming down to like almost close to the river, as I mentioned before. So it's around 200 meters. And from Am Zaum upwards, like up the hill, there is a single vineyard called Silberbichl, which I will talk to you about in a minute. And the sparkling wines have a very important history in our estate, as my dad was the first wine grower in Austria who started making own sparkling wine. He started this in 1976. Of course, there has been sparkling wine before 1976 in Austria, but only coming from big trading companies buying wine and making sparkling wine out of the wine, rather on a large quantity scale and not so much focusing on highest quality. So my dad was actually the first taking the own grapes, so the own fruit, making own wine, and doing like sparkling wine production all within our estate. So everything has been done in our winery ever since. So it's an important product, and we actually have 3 different sparkling wines in our portfolio, starting with the Brut Rosé, which is made from 100% Pinot Noir. All of our sparkling wines are always dedicated to a specific vintage, so they are all vintage sparklings, and they are staying on the lees for several years. So for the Brut Rosé and for the Brut Nature, they are in the reserve category. They stay on the lease for 4 years, so 48 months at least, even longer, depending when they are disgorged. The philosophy is similar to all the other wines as well. I want to bring the most characteristic from the vineyard, from the terroir, into the bottle. And therefore I allow a longer time on the lees, so that when it comes to disgorgement, I don't need to use any dosage. So all our sparkling wines are zero dosage sparkling wines, and therefore I allow longer lees contact time on the bottle in order to have a nice balance and creaminess on the palate, but just coming from the autolysis of the yeast on the bottle, and not from a dosage where you add any type of sweet, sugared wine or whatever. So we don't do this. Brut Nature, that's kind of our classic sparkling wine ever since. Brut Nature already implies no dosage given, and here it's a blend of about 80% Chardonnay, 20% Pinot Noir. Same like the others, dedicated to a vintage. And also same like Brut Rosé, spending about 4 years on the lease. Comparing the Brut Rosé to the Brut Nature, the Brut Rosé maybe shows a little bit more fruitiness. Brut Nature is very precise, more mineral driven, which personally I like a lot. So that's something you can drink all day long and you don't get tired, because it's kind of lively, you have a good minerality, you have a good freshness, crispness, and it's totally dry. And this dryness keeps you going on drinking, and you don't get tired. Blanc de Blanc is made of 100% white grapes. In this case, it's 100% Chardonnay. Like the current release now is vintage 2014. So it's been on the lease for almost 6 years. And here you have, in addition, this kind of nice creamy texture, this little bit more body on the palate, but even though being still elegant and finesse driven, and again without any dosage, dosage zero, Brut Nature, just nice to drink. Höhlgraben, it's actually a very important single vineyard to us, as since the winery was established in 1722, we have started owning land within Höhlgraben. So since everything started, we have vineyards over there, and Höhlgraben is known as being the classic Malat wine ever since. It's a great site because you have conglomerate soil with a slight layer on loess on top. So this gives a very spicy and kind of firm mineral characteristic to the Grüner Veltliner, which is like the traditional, more Austrian style of Grüner Veltliner. And I like the Höhlgraben as it is never too opulent, so it's always nice to drink. It's always moderate in alcohol, 12.5, 13% maximum, but usually it's around 12.5. So it's a good drinking wine with a good drinkability, but at the same time with a really high complexity. And that's what I really achieve in the wines, that they are more lean, not too heavy, but at the same time they have a good length, they have a good complexity, they have different layers. Each time when you take a sip, you discover a new sensational taste, and that's what I want to have in the wines. Höhlgraben is a hill going slightly up from 250 to 300 meters above sea level, and soil type, as I mentioned, it's conglomerate soil with kind of a slight layer of loess on top. As any other wines as well, Höhlgraben is fermented with the spontaneous, like with the natural yeast in the spontaneous way. I keep it on the fine lees in big wood casks for a couple of months before bottling, giving the wine some extra development and some nice kind of relaxed feeling before bottling, so that you probably also can feel in the wine that is crisp and fresh, but at the same time gives you the length and the complexity. Gottschelle is one of the classified vineyards here in our area, being a Erste Lage vineyard. The classification by the Austrian traditional wineries has been started in 1992 with the aim to have a look on those vineyards giving the best wines in the area, whereas Gottschelle is one of them. And in comparison to Höhlgraben, Gottschelle has a much deeper layer of loess on top, so it's more fertile. The water can be stored a little bit better, which gives a more yellow fruit characteristic to the wine. It's a little bit more exotic notes coming through, it's very creamy, but what's really great about Gottschelle is that it's not only loess, there is also a significant layer of gravel from the ancient riverbed of the Danube. So when you go out in the vineyard, you see that there is this layer sitting below, let's say, a few meters of loess, so the roots actually are growing into this layer of gravel, and then enhance also the spiciness in minerality. So you have a great combination between like the exotic yellow fruit driven aromas in addition to this herbal spicy notes coming from the gravel. 2018 is actually said to be a very hot year, which is not really true, because what was happening in 2018, that we had a very early vintage. So the start of harvest was super early, the earliest we've ever had, because we had a very early bud break in 2018 and a very early flowering. And it's no matter what's happening during the year, but it's every year the same and all over the world the same. From the time when the vines are flowering, it takes 100 days that harvest starts. And that was the same in 2018, but we had such an early flowering that we actually had to start picking end of August already, which was really very early. And at that time, like end of August, for sure it was still warm or hot. And that's why everybody says, yeah, 2018 was such a hot year. But it's not really true when you have a look on the overall annual temperature. Of course, it was on the higher end, but it was by far not as hot as, for example, 2003 or 2011. But saying this, having a very early start of harvest, of course, the challenge was to get enough physiological ripeness and to maintain a moderate level of sugar ripeness, so that the wine tastes ripe but not too alcoholic. And I think when you taste the 2018 Gottschelle right now, you can feel that it's nice and balanced, it's smooth. It's not too high in alcohol, it just has 13%, which is, I would say, moderate, especially on a year like this. And now it's just great to drink. When you compare 2018 to 2019, of course 2019 was one of the best years during the last 2-3 decades, and in this particular year, actually, I agree to the reviews of all the journalists saying it was such an extraordinary year, because quite often if journalists saying a vintage being one of the best, I'm not totally agree. Either it was too warm or there is not enough acidity, but 2019 was really a year where you have a really good ripeness on both sides. On the physiological ripeness, the sugar ripeness was high, but not too high. So 2019, for sure, the wines probably have been a little bit more high in alcohol, a little bit more powerful, but still on a good level, and they will have a great potential for the future. But right now, I would prefer drinking 18 because it's just this extra year of bottle aging gives the wine more depth and more kind of dimensions, more layers, more complexity to drink. Of course, you know, all my wines are like my kids and my babies, and for sure I have to treat them all equal and give them all the attention they need, and I cannot really tell that I like the one better than the other. but what I can tell that the Riesling from the single vineyard Steinbuhl is given the best explanation about what Michael Malat's wine style is about. So it's, as I mentioned already a couple of times, it's always elegant, it's always full of finesse, straightforward, pure, dry and firm with a good acidity. And the single vineyard Steinbuhl can show this wine characteristic to a very high extent, or let's say to the best extent from all the wines of our portfolio. And the Steinbuhl, why is it so special? Because of the soil you find. You have to think about that the name Steinbuhl has been given to the site in 1322 already, so almost 700 years ago. And people found out that days already that there is a lot of stones or a lot of rocks in the soil on this hill. So if you translate Steinbuhl into English, it would be the stony hill. Stein, stone, Bühel, hill, the stony hill. And the soil you find, it's called granulit. Granulit, it's a very special kind of sort of granite you find, but of course it has been decomposed over the millions of years. It's one of the oldest sites we have in our area, which is more than 200 million years old. And normally this type of soil or this rock type is covered with other soil material which is much younger, such as loess or things like this. But here the Steinbuhl is like a little island coming out of the ocean. I always compare it like Hawaii. You know, you have like the big ocean and then coming within nothing around little islands up to the surface. And that's similar with Steinbuhl. Steinbuhl has this particular granulate coming all the way up to the surface where the roots of the Riesling can grow into and give this very special characteristic to this wine. At that point, I probably need to mention that we don't have irrigation in all our vineyards except Pfaffenberg. So all the vineyards here in Furth around the winery are not irrigated, which actually I like it, because then the roots need to grow down into the ground deep in order to get enough water and in order to, you know, can grow and survive. And fortunately, and that's what's really good, that the vineyards, like the wines, have a good age already. So the roots made their way down into the ground already several meters. And that's a big advantage, because if I would need to replant a new vineyard in Steinbuhl right now, it could be challenging due to the climate change and due to the, of course, drier and hotter situation we find right now compared to 20, 30 years ago. But yeah, that's Steinbuhl. And from Steinbuhl, not far away, we have Silberbichl. So, but actually, when you have a look on Steinbuhl, which is like the eastern single vineyard on our area, and Silberbichl is the western. So in the middle, between Steinbuhl and Silberbichl, you find Höhlgraben and Gottschelle. So you have Steinbuhl on the eastern side, then you have Höhlgraben, then Gottschelle, and on the western side you have Silberbichl. And here again, the name gives you an idea about the type of soil you find. Silberbichl, in contrast to Steinbuhl. Bühel, Bichl, it's actually the same, both means hill. But you have the stony hill at Steinbuhl, and here you have the silver hill. And where is that, or why is that? Because you find microschist in the soil. When you go out in the vineyard, you can see some compounds in the soil which give this little silver reflection. And people named this site as Silberbichl also in the 14th century already, when they discovered the sensation, especially in the late afternoon, early evening, when the sun is going down and has a rather low angle to the surface of the vineyard, that you get some silver reflection on the surface of the soil. And that's why they named this hill as Silberbichl. And this microschist gives good minerality to the wine, and when you compare to Steinbuhl, this microschist has the ability to have a little bit better water supply. and it's very interesting to taste those two wines, because in terms of vinification, I always do totally the same. You know, Steinbuhl and Silberbichl, fermented spontaneous in stainless steel. Then I rack it off in bigger wood casks to keep it on the fine lees before bottling. So there is nothing made in a different way between Steinbuhl and Silberbichl. So when you taste these two wines, the difference is just reflecting the terroir, the site, the type of soil you find in the particular vineyard. And then there is one more specific single vineyard for Riesling, which is the Pfaffenberg. And that's actually a very new project for us, because I just had the possibility to have some grapes from Pfaffenberg. I think I mentioned before that all the grapes we are processing our wine is coming from our own vineyards. It's all estate fruit except Pfaffenberg. So Pfaffenberg, I had the chance last year, vintage 2019, so the first time to get grapes from a vineyard in Pfaffenberg from a nice lady I know for a long time, and she finally asked me if I want to have the grapes and making wine out of her Riesling grapes from Pfaffenberg, and I said sure, why not, but I want to have it as a continuous wine, not just a single shot having Pfaffenberg for one vintage and that's it. So I agreed with her that in the long run I'm slowly taking over the winemaking process, and she's actually doing a fabulous job, and she's taking care about this particular vineyard. That's her little baby, and I really be more than happy to have the grapes coming from her, and I'm looking forward to the future that with every vintage I can get from Pfaffenberg, that I can more feel into the soil, more feel into this vineyard, as it is a new one to me. But Pfaffenberg, obviously, and everybody knows, is one of the most kind of well-known vineyard within Kremstal. So it's on the western part of Kremstal, on the border to Wachau, and on the northern side of the river Danube, right next to the city of Krems. And there you have also kind of a primary rock situation there. There is gneiss, and this gives also a little bit more deeper ruby characteristic to this Riesling, if you want, like this. So it's a little bit more rustic, it's a little bit more kind of deep colored aromas coming through, compared to the very fragile Steinbuhl and the very kind of mineral driven Silberbichl. Village Furth, we have also Rosé, which is kind of special when you think about a Rosé coming from Austria, because usually the Rosé you find here in Austria are made out of Zweigelt or Blaufränkisch grapes, which are both very typical indigenous Austrian red grapes. But we are doing our Rosé from Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, since actually my dad planted one of the first Cabernet Sauvignon vineyards in 1980. And that's, to be honest, for sure something which sounds a little bit strange and weird, to plant Cabernet Sauvignon, which needs a lot of sun and a lot of kind of warmth in a rather cool climate area like Kremstal. But it was just as a matter of interest my dad did in 1980, and also at a time where it was not that important if, you know, where which particular wine or grape variety comes from which particular region. So it was just important to have a good quality red wine, because in 1980 or in the early 80s you could get a fabulous Grüner Veltliner and Riesling already, but the red wine development in Austria just started. So the demand for a good Austrian red was definitely there, and so my dad had a focus on red wine ever since. And that's why we still have a quite high percentage of red wine planted in our vineyard, which is more than 1/4, so it's between 25 and 30%. In all of our vineyards are planted with red grapes. And we still have a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon, although during the last 5 to 10 years I replanted quite a few Cabernet Sauvignon vineyards with Pinot Noir, because that's my favorite red grape and the red grape which fits to our area the best. but we still have some Cabernet, and in certain years where there is their ability to get it ripe, we make red wine, but we do a rosé every year as well, where we particularly pick the grapes on an early stage, so it's not a saignée, it's really dedicated to be like this, early picking, maybe on the stage where these grapes of Cabernet Sauvignon are not yet physiological ripe, but for the rosé, it's fine to get a little bit of, you know, a little bit of tannins from the berries, a little bit of kind of more structure to the wine. It's always very light, 11.5 alcohol. It's a very super easy drinking wine, especially in the summertime. And it's very unique due to this grape variety. The flavor profile is totally different to any other rosé you get from Austria. And that's what makes it special, and that's why people either don't like it or they love it. Unfortunately, the majority loves it, so it's a really nice drinking rosé, which we actually sell a lot. Here is the Furth Pinot Noir, and as I mentioned before, on the Furth wines, I really want to bring the typicity, like the typical notes of the grape variety to the wine. And here, Pinot Noir as being our most important red grape, and it's a perfect grape you can grow in our area, as we have like a more cool or moderate climate, especially when it becomes to the time when the berry is getting ripe. We have warm days and cool nights, which is great, also especially for Pinot. And on this wine, I like to enhance the fruit profile, like the strawberry, raspberry flavors, as well as like this herbal characteristic Pinot Noir can get on a very light and delicate style. So this wine has not been developed in new oak. It's actually developed in bigger wood casks, in older wood casks, which give not any taste to this wine. Sometimes there is maybe 1 or 2 barrels from the Zatzen, which I don't use for the single vineyard wine Zatzen. Then it goes to the Pinot Noir Furth as well, but usually it's always from a barrel which has been used already. So there shouldn't be any oak taste detectable, so it's all about the fruitiness, the precise, fine elegance of this wine. And what I particularly like is when you chill it a little bit, so you have it on a cooler temperature. You can also drink it perfectly on a warm summer day. Instead of a white wine, you can just cool it down a little bit and enjoy it also on a summer day, as it is not too heavy and nice and elegant to drink. Pinot Noir, again, here from a single vineyard called Satzen. And here, in contrast to the Pinot Noir Furth, this wine has actually get some oak, but only a really rather small percentage of new oak, maximum 20-25% of new barrels. All the rest is 1, 2 or 3 years old barrels, so that actually the characteristic from Satzen, from the vineyard Satzen, is not interfered or not kind of overtoned by oak. So it shouldn't be an oak Pinot Noir, it should be a Pinot Noir from the vineyard Satzen with an additional spiciness, just an additional dimension from the oak barrel coming through. It's always a wine with a great structure, with a very good aging potential. And yeah, that's what we believe is the best we can get out of Pinot Noir from our area. That's actually a totally different kettle of fish. I've been talking about our classic range, about our classic wines until so far, where it's most important where the grapes are coming from. So all these wines are like origin-based wines, either due to the village Furth or to the particular single vineyard. Here it's a little different, because here it's dedicated to the way of how the wine has been made. And you already see on the cap, on the label, it's an orange label with raw printed on the front label, meaning that those wines are skin fermented. And I have 2 different ones. There is a Gelber Muskateller, which is this, and a Gewürztraminer. As I think those aromatic grape varieties like very suitable for doing a skin contact or skin fermentation white wine. And I'm really wanted to prove that you can make an orange wine also in a way that it's clean and it's crisp and it's actually has a shiny flavor, and it's not fungy and it's not stinky. It's actually a nice elegant wine, but in a way that it's made in a very kind of reduced and traditional method. So fermented on the skins, but under a good temperature control. That's important, so that you can maintain this nice fruit flavors, this expressive fruit flavors from those grape varieties, Muskateller and Gewürztraminer, and actually those flavors can stay in the wine very well. It's on the skin for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks maximum. I also don't want to have an excessive skin contact time, as the phenolics and the structure should of course be detectable and upfront, but not overwhelming. And the fruit elegance should be clearly there and precise. So fermentation takes about 2 to 3 weeks on the skins. Then I'm pressing the grapes and bring the young wine into big wood casks, where they've been kept on the full lees until bottling. So during the development on the full lees, malolactic fermentation is happening. So then I can bring the wine into the bottle without filtration, without sulfuring. So it's just the wine itself, like the berries brought to the wine and brought into the bottle. And so you get this little bit of tannins from the skins, you get the characteristic from the skin fermentation, and you get these exotic fruits from the grape varieties, and it's just a little different approach than to all the classic style wines I've been talking before, and you probably know from our portfolio. But yeah, the trend is definitely there and the demand is there, and I think it's also worth giving a try, that those wines can be some really nice experience.